Hey, what's up? Noah Shachtman, editor of Danger Room, alongside Spencer Ackerman and Katie Drummond. Thanks for having us. First question's from Minor 9 Sharp 11, a funk music lover, no doubt, maybe a jazz player. And the question's about deaths in Afghanistan. We're averaging about 50 a month, and that's despite all this technology we're trying to use to protect soldiers over there. So would it be a lot worse, Minor 9 Sharp 11 asks, if there wasn't all this technology? And the answer is yeah, totally. We've got these really heavily armored vehicles called MRAPs that have blast-deflecting hulls that are protecting a lot of soldiers from improvised explosives. We've got radio frequency jammers that are stopping a lot of bombs before they even go off. Body armor is a lot tougher than it was back in the day. And hopefully there's a little bit better intelligence to let guys actually route around threats rather than just drive right through them or walk right into them. But maybe the biggest change, and the reason we've got so many soldiers surviving injuries in Afghanistan, is because of the improvements in medical technology. And fortunately for us, we have the world's leading expert in military medical technology.
Don't you know it?
At least the world's leading expert that is sitting in this room.
Yeah.
About
Of the three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also, worth noting just statistically speaking, this September compared to last September, despite record high levels of IEDs being detected in Afghanistan, we had half the fatalities over there from IED going off. But, then you get into this issue of more injured troops and, more troops with very, very life-threatening, very serious lifelong injuries. And so that's where you get into issues like prosthetics, traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress disorder are, implications that come from that. And so you see the military struggling a lot in that vein to sort of keep pace with the transformation from fatalities to injuries. And when it comes to medical technology in combat, in 2007, Gates made it a major priority to speed up the rate at which troops are taken out of combat and make it into a hospital. And I think that there's been something like a 25% pace increase. I think helicopters now, it's about a 47-minute trip in Afghanistan from combat to hospital. So, time is everything when you are in a situation like that, and more helicopters and faster medvac helicopters going from combat to hospital is, I think the Pentagon said just today that that's been the biggest difference as far as fatalities versus, long-term injuries or survival.
Look, fundamentally, this is a low-tech war, right? This is about, in a lot of ways, Afghanistan could have been fought, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe even 40 or 50 years ago. It's a lot of the same weaponry. It's a lot of the same, small unit tactics. And in a lot of ways, the U.S.'s technological advantages haven't turned into battlefield advantage, right? Just because we've got a zillion drones flying in the sky doesn't mean that we're, the Afghan war is won. But it's in this improvement in how soldiers are treated after they get wounded and how they're protected to keep them from getting wounded in the first place. That's been one of the areas in which the U.S.'s technical advantage has really shown up the best.
Stratomaster, another guitar fan we imagine, writes, do you think any more leaks as significant as the Afghan War Diary will pop up, or for the most part are sources going to be too scared? My guess on that, right now, Secretary Gates is reviewing policies that were put into place earlier in this decade to get more information down the line quicker, strategic level intelligence down to low-ranking soldiers out downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan. Big question that the WikiLeaks and the Afghan War Diary case pose is whether that really ought to remain the case or whether it's just an information security question. More than sources being scared to leak, I would imagine that's not really going to change. We are all, in journalism, the beneficiary of those sorts of leaks to different degrees. Is just going to be access issues that soldiers ultimately have, and we're waiting to see on whether Gates will decide to basically plug up that access, which would have a number of battlefield implications. If all of a sudden you're in forward operating base middle of nowhere in eastern Afghanistan and you don't have a decent enough battlefield sense of what's happening outside your area, what happened historically in your area before you arrive there, you're at a tremendous disadvantage. So we're still waiting to see how the Pentagon is going to respond from a policy perspective.
So the one other thing I'd say about
Are we back?
yeah, so the one thing, my guess is there is going to be a lot more leaks on the scale of the Afghan war diary, and I say that because I really think WikiLeaks, whether you're like in favor of it or not, I think is like the beginning of something really new and really cool. And while WikiLeaks has got its share of problems, it's it's sort of like the Napster of let me try that again. I'm on. Okay, are there going to be leaks as big as the Afghan war diary? I think there will be, because soldiers' ability to get into databases and hoover up tons of information has never been greater, A. And B, we've got sites like WikiLeaks and whatever's going to come after WikiLeaks, kind of like WikiLeaks 2.0, 3.0, that's going to let them do it. And so, yeah, I think we'll see more and more stuff start to get out. I think the real question will be what's in soldiers' heads, right, to leak this stuff. Right now, the biggest leaks have all seemed to come from one guy, right? This isn't like a mass movement of soldiers to like leak everything out. So if you start to see not just one Bradley Manning, but 2, 10, 50, 100 Bradley Mannings, I think that's when you're really going to see the dam break. And my guess is that even though WikiLeaks now has its problems, it's kind of the harbinger of something much bigger. So just like Napster gave way to LimeWire, gave way to iTunes, I think you'll see that same thing in terms of breaking secrets. And I think that while we've tried to cover WikiLeaks very critically, I think that's in general like an awesome thing, because there's way too much secrecy in our government, and there needs to be a little more sunshine.
So soon you'll want to pay $1.99 per leak document for the convenience of knowing precisely what you're going to get when you click through that XLS file.
I'll even pay $2.29 for the DRM free version of that leak.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah, I like that.
That's good value.
Wow. Consignor, I think it is.
Connoisseur.
No,
connoisseur?
Connoisseur spelled incorrectly.
Well, maybe
No, but that's because it's
cognac
cognitive.
Oh, I thought cognac.
Do you
Sorry, connoisseur.
do you think there will be a time when the vast majority of the U.S.'s military operations will be conducted remotely using things like UAVs, that's unmanned aerial vehicles, and robots? Answer, no. I think it's like really deeply ingrained in American military culture to let human beings handle those kind of life and death decisions. And so even on drones today, that's a pilot squeezing that trigger. There have been ground arm robots that have been technically functional for over 5 years, but the Army hasn't deployed them to Iraq and Afghanistan because basically they're too worried about the idea of a machine making a decision on its own to, shoot someone or not. So I think that working out those cultural issues is going to take a long time. And so I think that's decades out.
To build on that point, it's also important to note that there's a human being on the other end of anything that's going to shoot, whether out in the southwestern United States or in Afghanistan. The drones are controlled by some Army units.
Dude, these guys know that.
Okay.
They're on the internet.
All right, you're on the internet.
Now, at one point, my boy Peter Singer, who's also my boss at Brookings, so I have to, give him a little credit whenever I can. What he'd point out is that there's a lot of weapons today that, although technically a human is in the loop, basically the machine's making a lot of the decisions. So, you get these, they're in Iraq and Afghanistan. A mortar comes flying into a base, and a this CRAM, counter rockets, artillery, munitions machine, kind of like slews around, aims at the thing, and then says, "Okay, shoot or no." And the human says yes, or pre-authorizes it even to shoot, and it does. So, I think there's going to be degrees of autonomy, but I don't think it's going to be like robot army. So that's my answer to that. Slides 2006 asks, what do you think about the seemingly double standard towards Pakistan, which is basically funding the Taliban, helped create the Taliban, still playing footsie with the Taliban, maybe even giving Taliban marching orders, and purportedly supposed to be helping out the U.S. to fight those same Taliban, or many of those same Taliban. What's with that? You want to take that?
Sure. Here we have to take off my glasses because the subject is so heavy. We haven't figured out for the past 30 years what our relationship with Pakistan ought to require. Right now, what the Obama administration is basically gambling on is that there can be enough of a back-scratching, indirect approach where we fund, Pakistani electrical dams, help their economy out, provide enough aid that eventually we're looked upon favorably enough that Pakistan will want to play ball with us. Anytime you hear General Petraeus talk about the Pakistanis, the first thing he always notes is, they've taken so many casualties from the Pakistani Taliban assault in Karachi and Lahore, in Islamabad and everywhere else. And their military has taken a lot of casualties as they've moved on into the tribal areas. And this has sort of been a kind of love them to death approach after an initial period in 2009 of being more critical just didn't work. But this hasn't really worked either. And as we're taping this, there's talks going on in Washington right now about how to get the relationship back on track. And you'll hear, the Pakistanis talk really strongly about how they've just, come through the worst flooding in their history. What in the world, do we really expect them to do more? One of the things that the flood did expose is that it's just washed away a whole lot of the gains in the tribal areas that we've tried very hard to encourage the Pakistanis with lots of money and with a tremendous amount of diplomatic attention to try and get through. And it's still a muddle. We have really no idea. On the talks right now, you asked about that as well, slides 2006. It's not really the U.S. that's had such a hard time embracing the Pakistani involvement in talks with the Afghans and with the Taliban. It's the Afghans. It's the Karzai government who just simply for very understandable reasons just don't trust the Pakistanis to do anything but try and run Afghanistan. So we're in a situation where basically four parties to these talks, us, the Taliban, the Afghans, and the Pakistanis, just don't trust each other sufficiently to get these off the ground. That's why a lot of American diplomats just don't have a lot of faith that these things can be pulled off, even as they're crossing their fingers.
And you heard that crazy news today that the U.S. sent NATO planes to pick up Taliban leaders from Pakistan and bring them through to Kabul because we didn't trust the Pakistanis to guarantee their safe passage. So, in other words, we're protecting the Taliban versus the Pakistanis all of a sudden.
Who actually fund the Taliban in many cases.
Okay. Welcome to year 10 of the war.
I'll read this one.
Okay.
Okay, from Tootie is wondering, when can I buy a big dog to carry my groceries?
And when do you think that will be? First of all, what is the big dog? The big dog is the awesomest robot ever. Okay? It is like a four-legged mechanical thing that trots along and you can kick it on its side and it'll stumble for a minute and keep on walking.
And it has no head.
And it has
the most
head.
amazing thing about
Yeah,
this thing.
right.
It's
And
terrifying.
so what do we have like a price estimate on what Tootie can expect to pay?
I would say like $5 or $6.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And for your $5 or $6, yes, you will be able to get a big dog next week.
To carry your groceries like fucking anywhere.
Yeah.
It's got all the new version of the big dog is GPS enabled. It's got sensors, so it's supposed to follow you, actually like a dog. Previous models had tried to outfit it with just like tracking software so you could just program from point A to point B, but it turned out that enough obstacles can be in the way of point B, and that can be a problem for the dog. So now it's actually following its master. So
like
it's
that.
only a matter of time before it's encouraged for home use.
Yeah. So on the real, the big dog is it's being funded by the Pentagon, and it it's still in very early development. It's really cool. It's been tested with soldiers at Fort Bragg and elsewhere, but I do not think you will have a big dog carrying your groceries, unfortunately, for several decades to come, which is too bad because your groceries are undoubtedly heavy, which means you'll have to stick to Fresh Direct for now. Viva Knievel, which is a pretty awesome username, asks, why was the XM8 nixed? The XM8 is like the big dog of guns. It's like the awesomest gun the military ever worked on. Why was it nixed? And is there a replacement strategy for the M4 or the M16 family on the horizon?
The short answer for the first question is bureaucracy, and the short answer for the second question is no. The XM8, as Noah said, it's this really amazing rifle. In nearly every test it was given at Aberdeen Proving Ground, which is one of the Army's big favorite places to test these things, it outperformed the M4 really on just every category. It jams less, its sights are better, it's more accurate. Unfortunately, during the life cycle of the M4, when it was of the XM8, when the Army started looking at it in development, it had a lot of bureaucratic enemies, both inside the Army, people who didn't want to sort of leave the M4 M16 family that Colt had been producing for decades at this point. Jack Kane, who you may remember is one of the early surge advocates, who used to be the Army's Vice Chief of Staff, was really heavily involved with it. He liked it a lot, and unfortunately couldn't persuade the Army to ultimately adopt it. In 2005, it ended up on the chopping block, but it's sort of survived in zombie versions, like a lot of military hardware.
How does it perform against zombies?
Basically, you want to just definitely have this instead of the M4 when the zombie attacks come, because you've got a more precise shot. The bullet is still the same, smaller than your AK-47 7.62 round. Nevertheless, against the zombie invasion, it should perform pretty well. The carbine, the M4 carbine rifle, that's still on the horizon forever. The Army owns more than 400,000 of them at this point. Interestingly, a cousin of the XM8 is this sort of cool, smart mini grenade launcher called the XM25.
No, hold on. That is the zombie fighting.
That is not really. I would not want to trust my anti-zombie strategy to the XM25, because you've got the bomb pellets that come out into the air. Basically, it shoots out these smart mini grenades that talk to a tracking system inside the gun. But as soon as the shrapnel hits, when the thing explodes, you're not really so sure that it's going after the brain. A lot of those pellets could lodge in the body. So I think you still have to, if we're using light infantry tactics, we're probably still going to be using carbines against the zombies.
Got it. Speaking of zombie warfare, the next one is about zombie computers and cyber warfare. And they ask, Robot One asks, could you comment on the operational capabilities of the Air Force 24th, the Navy's 10th Fleet, and the NSA in terms of offensive network operations? I would, but I'd have to kill you. Okay, no. I can talk about it a little bit. Basically, what Robot One is referring to is there are these new units in the military that are specifically geared to be cyber warriors. In a lot of cases, all that means is the same old sysadmins and communications guys just have like a cool new badge. They're not necessarily doing too much new, and a lot of them are just doing plain old network administration, network defense, antivirus, host administration, what have you. Okay, but there's a few guys that do offensive stuff, and that can range from interrupting communications. Let's say, for example, just theoretically, that insurgents in a certain country communicate by cell phone or walkie-talkie. Theoretically, maybe theoretically those communications could be intercepted or interrupted. Up to and including, you guys have heard about this this Stuxnet piece of malware that may or may not have gone after Iranian nuclear facilities. Well, you know, if think about what Stuxnet, which is very complicated, is to, you know, kind of plain old malware. Think about what something much more sophisticated would be to Stuxnet, and you can get an idea of some of the things that some of the offensive things that might go on from the military. This stuff is super duper secret, so it's a little hard to talk about, and it's hard to report about. But I think that's about what I can say. Robot One also asked, are there any recent known cyber operations carried out by the U.S.? I think it's sort of like, depends on how you define cyber. I know that at the beginning of the Iraq War, for example, you know, a lot of key Saddam Hussein officials got text messages and got emails saying to give up, or maybe to where they could give themselves up, kind of like a new version of the leaflet drop. And other than that, I don't know how much else there is. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting, but that's kind of what's out there. He also asked for someone interested in this, which would be the best agency military branch to pursue. I think I'm not really in the business of like doing those kind of recommendations, so I'm going to let you figure that one out on your own, man.
Here's something guaranteed to divide the staff.
Okay.
Roland 19D. With the exception of your senior editor, I don't really see any obvious previous connection interest in military hardware in the profiles of your writers' contributors. Are you guys writers cutting teeth on mil-spec, or are you mil-spec people who just happen to know how to write? If the former, how steep is the learning curve? Katie, do you want to go on that and then I'll go? Or?
Sure, I can go. You know, I don't write a lot about military hardware. I think where my interests and my skills lies in writing on, you know, science, medicine, health, and, you know, the overlap with the military in that vein, and that's why I'm here. And I do know how to write, and bust my ass on every story I do for Danger Room, and when I don't, I'm gently informed. And so I think that's my answer to that one.
And from my perspective, you know, I had done for the last couple of years, I'm based in Washington, a lot of policy stuff, a lot of strategy stuff, and that's what kind of brought me on board here. And you know, I'm still as the noob mastering the learning curve, but I felt I was pretty well equipped because I'd been a faithful Danger Room reader since its inception. But yeah, like Katie, I just bust my ass on each one of these stories, and also trust commenters to tell me when I am wrong.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. I think we're doing awesome.
I think so.
Yeah.
Particularly Katie.
Particularly you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're writers trying to make sense of this stuff, right? You know, we're not military insiders, you know, trying to spread the inside the Pentagon. We're guys on the outside, you know, just trying to figure it out. And sometimes we do a good job, and hopefully we do a good job, and sometimes we don't. And so I think the thing that's really challenging as a writer about this field is, like, every time you think you got a handle on it, right? You know, it's just so much bigger. It's like, you know, every time you think you're, like, getting a handle on drones, it's like, well, wait a minute, let's start talking about fighter jets. And every time you got a handle on fighter jets, it's like, wait, let's talk about the military budget as a whole. And then once you get a handle on the military budget, it's like, wait, let's talk about the politics of that. And so it's just like, the field is huge, and it's almost impossible for one person to really get the straight, you know, to get the drop on this whole field. And so we're just, we're scrounging along doing our best. And, you know, I think both of these guys are awesome writers and awesome reporters, and so and they'll be better next week than they are this week. So that's what I got for that. How often does it occur that you learn about new tech info but are unable to report details about it? Yeah, that happens. Oh, and I'm sorry, that's I eat cereal for dinner. So that happens, and it happens in one of two ways. Way number one is you learn, one person tells you something, right? But you don't have but you can't confirm it. That happens a lot. And we don't, despite the fact that we run a blog, we don't want to just put any random crap out there that we happen to hear from one person. So we really try to follow it up and try to get things nailed down before we publish on them. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is people do like to tell reporters things in confidence and then say, but don't report on that. And that puts you in a little bit of a bind. And so it sometimes takes a while to sort that out. And then for me personally, sometimes I get into a little bit of a bind because I write for this magazine called Wired too, and sometimes I'm like caught in between trying to gather all this stuff for magazine work and doing stuff for the blog, and it's a question of like, when do you dump stuff out? When?
There's also a variant on way number two. I spent August in Afghanistan for Danger Room, and among some of the things I got a chance to report on are these drone-equipped military task forces that go out hunting networks of insurgents that plant IEDs. So among the course of my reporting on this, I got the chance to check out actually a station in a metal box out somewhere in Afghanistan where people sit and remotely pilot the drones. I saw a tremendous amount of technology that I had only previously read about, watched it happen in action, and then was just, negotiating at the end of this, how can I present this to a reader in an informative way while still respecting the legitimate needs of the military to not have, every particular detail of this thing come out. And that's a negotiation. Every journalist is going to have to engage in that sort of thing, and it happens. To some degree, it's unfortunate. To others, it's not. And it's basically a question of using your judgment. At the same time, it is still kind of awe-inspiring and can lead you in directions for ideas on later stories that can probably better contextualize how to present the implications of some of this technology down the road.
Rahu asks, no wait, oh no, sorry. Phantasmagorical asks about Wired. It's traditionally been a magazine geared towards technology, computers, and pop culture. But the popularity of Danger Room, relative popularity, suggests a growing trend in media moving outside of their traditional markets. So what's up with that, he asks. Is that something you intended or anticipated from Danger Room's inception?
Luckily, we have Danger Room's founder here to answer that.
Well, thank you, Spencer. The answer is yes, I did intend that. Yeah, basically, I started this blog called defensetech.org in 2003, which then I sold off. And then when I was talking to Wired in 2007 about starting Danger Room, very specifically, I didn't want to make it into like, the gadget blog, but for military hardware. I wanted to explore deeper issues about strategy and policy, and I wanted to look at crazier, different stuff. Crazier, that's probably the wrong word, but different stuff. At the time, I really wanted to do a lot of kung fu and other martial arts blogging. And
so
that
crazier is the right word.
Yeah, and so that never actually wound up happening. Although maybe we could like have a big Krav Maga fight after this.
I'm up on it.
You're down? Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was kind of purposeful, and one of the cool things about Wired.com is, you do have an ability to kind of like really to stretch the boundaries, and about Wired magazine too. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in the magazine, now in its whatever it is, 15th, 16th year that wouldn't have been in its first year, and that's because I think we keep growing, and I think it's good.
And I also want to add, I think another thing that's great about having some of this coverage at a website like Wired.com, where you might have people who aren't in that very nicheified, national defense audience reading your stuff, something like DARPA, where I think we're probably one of the only blogs that covers that, rigorously. Mm-hmm. So to have that get a little bit more exposure, and then to have, sometimes have bigger outlets picking up on some of this stuff and reporting on it, I think, as long as we get credit where credit's due, which we don't always, but I think that's another plus.
Prahu asks, what is Wired's policy? What is Wired's policy concerning anonymous military sources? And does Wired take any steps to vet information coming from the military? Basically, our policy is, what is our policy again? Our policy is, look, we don't want to give people anonymity just so they can, talk shit about their bureaucratic enemies. But we do want to give anonymity if it's to protect their job or to protect their well-being. And especially when covering the military beat, anonymity is often required to get people to talk. So we try to use it judiciously. We try not to just let it be for people to settle scores or play politics. And do we try to take any steps to vet information coming from the military? Yeah, we do, and that's why we try to get multiple sources on whatever we're working on, because we don't just want to take, reprint some squeakings of a Pentagon anonymous.
And particularly when someone insists on talking about, some particular development, especially in the either the policy or the tech fields anonymously, that's sort of when your mind kind of goes, my God, I need as many sources on this as possible, because what's their agenda going forward?
Yeah. Spencer, this last one's for you.
Okay.
This question is specifically for you.
Thank you, Big
From
Bopalop.
Big Bopalop. 48 points.
48 points.
4 days ago.
My God.
My God. As a journalist for the Progressive Washington Independent, I reported on various civil liberties issues, from Guantanamo about the assassination attempts on the radical preacher and American citizen Anwar al-Awlaki, denial of habeas corpus. But in my new position at Non-Political Wired, it seems as though the focus has moved towards military tech, tactics, and organizations. So are there any pressure from my superiors at Danger Room to avoid writing about issues from a liberal perspective?
Hey, this interview is over,
And
okay?
I say no, absolutely none. That would never happen. And in reality, what I try and do as I've moved into this new position is figure out ways in which our audience, to the degree to which they're interested in and invested in questions about civil liberties as they are, as you can read on our blog and our sister blog Threat Level and elsewhere, is to just find relevant ways of bringing these questions back around. I don't find that Wired readers are particularly interested in political score settling, in the who's up, who's down stuff that takes place a lot in Washington, even in defense reporting. So I'm making a conscious effort to leave that stuff alone, but we're also trying, as you can see from some of the stuff we've written about private security contractors, from some of the stuff we've written about techniques in interrogation, and about al-Awlaki and drone strikes, to also incorporate that element into the blog. As Noah had said earlier, we are expanding our interests. We're expanding our core focus in ways that Wired probably didn't have earlier on its inception. It's just sort of natural to do it. So,
Like that.
thank you for asking that question.
So that's the end of those top questions. And I guess I got a question for you guys too, which is, what do you want to see us cover? What do you want to see more coverage of? What do you want to see less coverage of? If you guys go into the comments section now, I'll be there too. My username, it's pretty hard to figure out. It's Noah Shachtman. And the top rated comment, we'll do a post on. So tell us what you want us to write about it, and we will become your slaves.
Be our assignment editor. Noah just doesn't want to have to assign stuff himself anymore. It's really
Right. Pretty lazy. All right.
Cool.